Hi everyone, I'm Chip Paul with New Pharma, and I'm here today to present a very special class, the Endocannabinoid System Basics with the New Pharma Model of Human Function. Very exciting. And in this class, basically the student will understand the history of the endocannabinoid system and its discovery. Very important. The student will learn three major points concerning the importance of the endocannabinoid system. The student will be taught the New Pharma Model of Human Function at a high level. Again, we'll get into more details in deeper classes later, but at a high level, we're going to learn this model. And then also the student will be taught about how this knowledge applies to current disease states, so current issues. So basically, how can you take this knowledge and apply it practically? Module 1, we'll go through the background and history of the endocannabinoid system. In Module 2, we'll explain the endocannabinoid system in perhaps a different way than you've ever seen it talked about. And then in Module 3, we'll talk about how the endocannabinoid system functions with some other major systems within the New Pharma Model of Human Function. And then lastly, we'll revisit a disease state. So we'll talk this through a disease state. We'll actually do this through a couple of disease states, which I think is exciting. But you'll see how this kind of applies to real world. Okay, so Module 1, background and history. Why are we not taught the power of nature? Why does medicine insert itself between humanity and nature? These fundamental questions are important. Things perhaps have been hidden and obscured from our view due to a need to both control and profit from our condition. All right, so who discovered the endocannabinoid system? Well, the endocannabinoid system, again, was around because people were manipulating it, was something called Indian hemp, and then before that, Bang and Ma. So you have to go all the way back to really the ancient Chinese to get a first understanding of where cannabis started as a medicine. And literally it started as a medicine before the written word in China. So it's that old. The first Chinese language had a symbol for medical marijuana. They called it Ma, M-A. The Indians had a symbol and a word for marijuana. They called it Bang. So this has been around for a long time. But it was only really in the 1900s. We'll talk about something not on the slide, so I'll give you guys something a little extra. But in the 1900s, Cambridge University started experimenting with marijuana. And they started with, and Indian hemp is what they called it, but they started by making something called red oil. And this red oil was used to study basically the properties of marijuana. The first constituent that they discovered out of red oil was something called CBN. So it was, something that we don't hear much about was the first thing that they really discovered in cannabis. It was very dangerous to make the red oil, and a guy named Spidey blew himself up in his lab making red oil, and so Cambridge University shut down those experiments. But the next round of experiments really started in the 40s with a gent named Roger Adams. So Roger Adams was hired by Henry Anslinger, who was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, to characterize marijuana, but kind of demonize it, right? And so Adams went on, he discovered basically CBD, CBN was already discovered, CBG, most of the constituents in cannabis he discovered. He couldn't find THC in the actual plant itself. He theorized what it was. He actually made THC by converting CBD, or the red oil, into THC, a psychoactive substance, which he theorized was the main psychoactive substance in marijuana. He then went on to weaponize THC. So again, not a good dude, although he deserves his place in the history of things here. So we kind of fast forward to 1964. Again, Adams was doing a lot of stuff through the 50s. They did a lot of weaponization of medical marijuana. They tried to make it a weapon. They basically wanted something that they could spray on people from the air and kind of give them couch lock. Adams got pretty far down the road there, and we, again, it's, we don't even, he's weaponized something that's safe, which seems to happen a lot in nature, right? Okay, so medical marijuana though, when did it kind of come really on the scene? Well, 1964, a guy named Raphael Mechoulam came along and said, hey, what Roger Adams there theorized was in the plant as the psychoactive thing is the psychoactive thing. He discovered THC in the plant. By the way, he did so with your money. NIH has funded Israeli research into medical marijuana since the 60s to the tune of at least $100,000 a year. So a lot of this research has been done with your tax dollars. Something else that's been done with your tax dollars is in 1968, the University of Mississippi became the first place in the United States where they could grow medical marijuana for research, okay? So they started doing this in 68. They're still doing this today. If you want to research real marijuana, you apply through a grant through the National Institute of Health, and they send you to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and you get your grant. And when you get your grant, you say, give me my marijuana I want to use. That comes from the University of Mississippi. Used to all come from the University of Mississippi. In the last couple of years, that's changing a little bit. I think there's 2 other designated places, and there's a reason for that. It's actually a twofold reason, but one of the reasons is this. So I'll tell you our experience first. So in 2016, when Cindy and I sort of developed New Pharma, we wrote our patents, finished our patents, and started talking about what we discovered, or what we had, I guess, rediscovered at New Pharma, we got a bunch of people excited. We got a bunch of people excited at University of Mississippi because it's about plants, and that's what they do at University of Mississippi is they study plants. So we got invited down there, and these are the 2 actually PhDs that run the marijuana program. We got asked to not show their faces, so we're not going to show their faces. But we got to tour the facility. We also got to tour, I got to meet with, 10 PhDs down there, which was really cool. Talk about what they do, talk about what we're doing, talk about our interesting work, and again, how that sort of overlaps. Great, we have a great relationship with the University of Mississippi and always have though. But anyway, one of the things that was very obvious to me, but hadn't occurred really to anybody down there yet, and again, no offense, because no one is trained on this system. No one understands this system the way they should. Again, it's just not in mainstream yet. That's why, we're teaching this class right now. But again, so medical marijuana, and this will tie back to University of Mississippi in a second, I promise. Medical marijuana runs a continuum between indica, which affects your endocannabinoid system in an extreme way, to sativa, which affects your endocannabinoid system in kind of the opposite extreme way. So again, cannabis affects this system. It kind of pings the system all across its function. And this is very important because an indica strain of cannabis, something with a lot of CBD and no THC, is going to manipulate your body in a different way than something with a lot of THC and no CBD, which we'll talk about in great detail later. But again, it runs a continuum. That's the important thing. So kind of one side of your endocannabinoid function, down regulation, is over here, and the other side, up regulation, is over here. And it just turns out that the extreme one side of cannabis affects this most prominently over here, and the extreme other side of cannabis affects this most prominently over here. So that's why cannabis is such a powerful tool. It manipulates this system all across it. But again, it's an understanding of this continuum that's super important. So Cindy and I go down to University of Mississippi, and we ask these guys, what are you growing? What strains of marijuana are you growing? This is so cool because, God, we can study all this stuff. And they said, we're growing Oaxacan, Mexican Oaxacan. Like, okay, all right, great. What else are you growing? And they said, we're growing Oaxacan, Mexican Oaxacan. Like, okay, great. What else? Oaxacan. Mexican Oaxacan. Okay, guys, do you know what that means? What that means is that every single bit of marijuana research that's been done in the United States since 1968, because this is all they've grown since 1968, we have characterized this little sliver of the endocannabinoid system. This little sliver of how this strain affects the endocannabinoid system. We don't know anything about it. And by the way, it's a sativa hybrid, so it's kind of over on this side. But we don't know anything about all of this side of influence of the endocannabinoid system with real marijuana research. And we don't know anything about this side with real marijuana research. All we've done is characterize this. Again, that's great, but there are certainly conditions that live over here that need to be studied with marijuana research. So this is part of the reason why the anecdotal evidence, the things that you hear about medical marijuana and why it works and how it works so well with things, that is kind of disconnected from the actual research, because the actual research has just been here. This runs a continuum all across everything, okay? So you go to your doctor and you go, doc, and you may live in a medical marijuana state, you may not. And again, we're talking about marijuana, but marijuana is what affects the endocannabinoid system. So it's important to have a history of kind of how this works and where we got to where we are right now as a starting place. And marijuana certainly is a part of that, or cannabis, medical cannabis. So again, when did the training begin on this endocannabinoid system, the thing that medical cannabis affects, this system inside of us? Best way to look at this is endorphin and morphine. So we know what morphine is, and we know we have an endorphin system. We understand morphine was used to discover it, but there's a whole lot of things that affect our endorphin system that are not morphine. And similarly, cannabis was used to discover something called the endocannabinoid system inside of us, but there are a whole lot of things that affect the endocannabinoid system other than cannabis, okay? So, important point, very important point, because we're going to get into that in great detail. But anyway, why didn't your doctor, know about this system? Why isn't this system, it's apparently really important, all these medical marijuana people think so, why isn't this system being researched at your state university? If you live in Maryland, it is. If you live in Mississippi, it will be soon. But why isn't it researched at your major university? Well, again, this system lives outside the normal sort of type of, let's say, research and medical study. So the normal type of research and medical study begins with something I call the insurance triangle. So FDA, basically FDA, physician, pharmacy, but insurance covers all this, okay? And so all of the clinical research right now, all medical research, all university research, all the dollars, all the money, the NIH money, all of that really focuses right on that little triangle. Well, the problem with studying the endocannabinoid system is the thing that you need to study it couldn't get into the FDA system because it's federally illegal, okay? And so that makes it sort of non-traditional. A university would really have to go out and go, oh, well, marijuana affects the endocannabinoid system, and there's enough data there to build a whole program around the endocannabinoid system. And again, where does the data come from? It comes from this triangle. So there's data out here, but it's all over the place, and it's kind of all over the place. It's not like how you'd like to go and look at FDA clinical trials about a drug, right? Because that's all buttoned up and nice. But the research here is all over the place. But anyway, researchers don't understand the power of this system, and they haven't, demanded that their universities put in classes, they are now, but so that these could be taught. So literally your doctor, unless he's minted after 2019, and unless he had some undergraduate work in 2019 and was in Maryland, he probably still doesn't know about this endocannabinoid system. But this will be the biggest new pieces of curriculum put in universities over the next 5 years. I guarantee it. Might be some stuff about health and viruses, but this will be huge, okay? So again, this needs to be taught in every single major university. The reason that it's not is just how it's developed and how the knowledge is developed. Okay, that's the end of Module 1. Wait till you see Module 2.